Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So hi, welcome to our next webinar in our Summer of Automation series, Driving Financial Agility with FloQast. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. As you know, all mics are turned off for this webinar, so if you have a question, please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. I will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the presentation and towards the end as well. This webinar will be recorded and available afterwards along with the slides, so look for that email in the coming days. My name is Sophia Bascuzo. I'm the Customer Marketing Associate here at RKL eSolutions. I'm joined by Jaysen Dyal, Marketing Manager at FloQast. Jaysen started his career in public accounting, focusing primarily on pre-IPO tech companies and nonprofit audits. He then transitioned into technical accounting and reporting manager at a pre-IPO tech company, Jam City, where he was tasked with responsibilities like performing accounting research on technical and financial reporting during monthly, quarterly, and annual close. While at Jam City, Jaysen used FloQast and saw the value of the product, so he made the pivot to marketing and joined the product marketing team. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jaysen.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to be speaking here on the Summer of Automation. Again, as introduced, my name is Jaysen Dyal, inactive CPA. I'm excited to bring to you all a topic on operational accounting's key role in driving digital agility. So we're in a period where technology is very much in the field, in the accounting industry, and so I'm going to be focusing on how you can utilize operational accounting. We'll define that. We'll define what accounting operations is, the changing game of accounting and finance, how the financial close is a unifying force for transformation, key criteria to build metrics around operational excellence and things to look for, and then finally preview FloQast as technology to achieve that operational excellence. And so we'll kind of define it, run through how it can be a unifying force for transformation, and then show how FloQast brings in technology to achieve that operational excellence. First, a little bit about FloQast. We are an accounting workflow automation company, and so you'll see what that means. Even it was a bit unclear to me when I first joined, but you'll see what that means once we get into the later parts of the presentation. We help accounting teams achieve operational excellence. And so executing workflows, accounting is a very recurring workflow industry. We do the same things every month as it relates particularly to the close. So it's getting very prescriptive, allocating responsibilities so your team can achieve excellence in how you are operating. Founded in 2013, we have a unique approach to organizational structure. 70% of our frontliners are ex-accountants. So we bring market expertise into the building, and that results in a lot of products that are purpose-built by accountants for accountants. We have over 2,200 customers, and that is obviously rising each quarter. Offices in US and UK. We've actually also opened an office in Australia as well that is rapidly expanding. G2 crowd highest financial close software. So our bread and butter is just the close, which is mostly going to be the conversation today, but you'll see how we've expanded into other areas as well. So obviously our flagship product, we have a high rated rating from G2. In addition, from Trust Radius as well, 98% of customers achieve target business value or higher. And what that means is goals that they've set out upon implementing FloQast, 98% of those customers have achieved that target or higher. So excited to get into a little bit of thought leadership. But first, our goal at FloQast is to forever elevate accounting. We are in a new era where I would say pre-pandemic, most would consider accounting more of a back office function. And so during the disaggregation of the workforce into remote areas, remote hybrid, the need to drive agility and pivot really brought the accounting function from the back to the middle of the office, meaning it is integrated across all of the functions. Accounting and accounts deliver great strategic value, which I think is something that those companies that pivoted very well during a challenging time, in challenging times we exist in today, in terms of the recession, were able to bring the accounting function into a more central office, and accountants were able to deliver that strategic value beyond remaining in the technical and remaining in the weeds. We'll get into more of that. And in addition, accounting will be the operational heartbeat of the enterprise. These are our goals. These are our pillars at FloQast. It is what we are trying to deliver, and we are trying to equip teams with technology that empowers them to become more strategic. We try to automate sort of the low-hanging, mundane tasks so that your team has a bandwidth to be able to be more strategic. The truth today, accounting is the operational backbone for driving company success. If you go to the doctor, the first thing they do is gather a couple quick metrics from you, your blood pressure, your weight, and such. Well, accounting is that same medical data for a company. And so the driving force of agility and being able to pivot requires knowing where you are today and having accurate numbers that are delivered timely. And so really making the case that accounting is the operational backbone for organizations. How do we know this? The role of the office of the CFO is vastly expanding. And so if you look at from an accounting function brought into the middle of the office to finalize numbers, deliver to the finance team to build projections, models, pivot, executing M&A transactions, the office of CFO has expanded. And so this was sort of a telltale sign that the accounting function as well has been brought into a more strategic role. However, the issue being accountants today, some have made that transition, others are still lagging behind. And so what we've seen is accounting and finance teams are often still in the weeds of manual, tactical, repetitive work. And what does that look like? It looks like ticking and tying, disaggregated data sources that require additional levels of reconciliation. It looks like hunting down audit evidence during the audit instead of having things in a centralized repository. It looks like not capturing workflow at the source. Accounting is one of those unique functions that has to have a proof of work for when the financial statement audit comes around. And so getting caught in the manual tactical work that should be automated so that your team can get out of the weeds. But this is where some teams find themselves today. So in the summer of automation, quite on theme of how can we get teams out of that manual work. The growing challenge is that the pace of today's operating model is a pressure cooker. You have higher scrutiny. Accounting teams have higher scrutiny, tighter deadlines. If your team is planning on going public, that private to public transition requires closing the books faster, being able to execute your audit quicker, and producing audited financials sooner. The ever expanding compliance. And so we're seeing SOX or ESG requirements that are coming down the pipeline, expanding the compliance need requirement across accounting teams. Greater volatility, right? We're looking at markets today, and there's more need to be able to pivot as a result of the volatility that occurs in the market. And some teams are still remote, other teams have moved to hybrid, but nonetheless, the work environment has changed. And so that adds to the pressure. In addition, 70% of non-accounts are bogged down with non-strategic tasks would take up 70% of their time. Risk exposure includes a 64% have indicated there's a growing compliance complexity. So that speaks to that escalating pressure in the visual on the right. And in a survey, we noted that 89% of accounts are feeling increasingly stressful at their job. So there's this impending pressure cooker environment for controllers and their teams. And so a change is needed. Controllers are stuck in a perpetual balancing act between accuracy and speed. Is it really possible to get both? Sometimes it takes a second look or an additional set of reviews to really validate the accuracy, but that slows down the speed. There's a perpetual balancing act between control and flexibility, changing workflows, changing processes versus remaining the same. A perpetual balancing act between visibility and productive work. Visibility being additional status meetings or updating status reports versus providing teams the bandwidth to be able to do productive work. So there's this constant balancing act as you venture into this transition from tactical, performing step-by-step tasks to close the books and execute accounting workflows to becoming more strategic, delivering those numbers sooner, having the story as being the transaction executors, and having the story, understanding what contracts exist to move into a more strategic role. But it's a balancing act of getting there. And there is little to no clarity on what that path looks like. With all that said, I believe we're at a generational moment that occurs as a result of the pressure cooker environment. Controllers must meet the challenge to navigate forward. And this is what we believe at FloQast, and this is what drives our product development, is what is the next biggest pain point that we can solve that provides accounting teams, controllers to move into that strategic role. And it must be managed through more risk, more uncertainty, and course correction. So accounts love repetitive work, but I think it takes time to get to a better version of repetitive work where your team is more leveraged and is able to meet the growing demands of teams today. When we're looking at technology and understanding what the leverage model looks like, how to appropriately leverage technology, what is the problem, what is the challenge that technology is trying to solve? It should be automating the mundane recurring tasks, simplifying lines of communication without giving up scalability or control. And so I've talked with teams that understand technology has potential value, but oftentimes they'll bring in 20 plus applications into their tech stack. And so what you end up having is you've solved one problem but created another with disparate sources of data that, if they aren't speaking to one another, if they aren't integrated with one another, creates a data problem. If you look at the different levers of how technology can help, you have transaction management. This is where ERPs are amazing. Timely and accurate processing of business transactions. And so an ERP is an example of implementing technology. It may be the first thing that you implement, but nonetheless, it is an example. So that's where those ERPs are very strong, but they don't do it all. In terms of increasing collaboration, reducing silos between people and information. So you might think of something like Slack or Teams, email, but having an application that can integrate to that as well to capture that collaboration that's taking place, to bring your team together and reduce those silos. If you think about control, this is unique to the accounting industry. Process adherence, timeliness, review and approval, documentation. There are tools that can assist in that area of organizing your documents, verifying control execution and process adherence. Scalability, you can have a great tool, but the goal is for any company to grow. And so if your tool is not scalable, that can cause its own set of issues of either having to replace your tech stack with another tool, which is an implementation process that causes a lot of pain. So obviously scalability is important for your teams. Visibility, again, in a work environment where teams are remote or hybrid, and even on site, having a real-time centralized insight into monitoring goals, identifying bottlenecks, completion status, makes the status meetings more effective. Instead of where are we, it's solving problems in your status meetings. And so there are tools that provide visibility. And lastly, integrated and native resources. I do believe this is most important because there are tools that exist that can solve any of the previous, the 5 levers to the left, but utilizing tools and modules that work together seamlessly, I think is most important because it brings back the data problem that can occur if you have too many applications in your tech stack trying to solve individual problems, which is great, but if they're not working together, you really create a different problem. So having an integrated and native environment, just as your people on your team need to work together, they don't work in silos. Your tech stack should operate the same way, integrated and working together seamlessly. Now, when you look at the close, it's mostly disconnected from upstream and downstream processes. It's a waiting game, and that causes delays. I believe it is the close is the most important deliverable that accounting teams can have. It's finalizing the numbers. You have upstream workflows, ongoing management of AP, AR, payroll, RevRec, fixed assets, treasury and cash. You have all these upstream workflows that are occurring on a day-to-day. And then comes time for the close, where you have to bring all of those transactions together, validate your ERP, testing the ERP data to ensure its accuracy, because that ERP data then gets pushed downstream into planning and budget for the finance team, financial planning, management performance reporting. So there's a reporting function, there's a compliance function, audit readiness, and then there's also additional modeling that occurs, additional analytics that are executed by your finance team in order to understand where things are, where things need to go. But you look at the close, it really is a central point between that upstream and downstream. And so it is a key connection point for all applications, because it's whether waiting for the upstream applications to provide the data information or providing downstream enough time to be able to perform accurate and insightful analysis, or being audit ready to get a stamp of approval, get that audit letter, and be able to distribute your financial statements. This is where at FloQast, when we talk about what is the most important, biggest pain point for accounting teams, this is why we started with the close. And we ventured outward, but the close is the main challenge that we started with. And so if you look at the close, based on what I've said in the previous slide, it is a unifying force for transformation. We've noted with our customers that focusing on the close and creating a repetitive process that your team can execute results in 26% reduction in time to close the books monthly, 26% reduction in time required for the audit process. If you look at the downstream, 39% increase in accuracy. You're not reopening periods. You're not weary about whether numbers are right. And when it comes time for that audit, you have additional confidence with a 23% reduction in discrepancies noted by auditors. And so here you have speed and accuracy, right? That was the first lever that we were talking about for controllers. Is it possible to have both? Well, if you create a prescriptive, repetitive process that can be captured, that creates operational excellence. And so this is where at FloQast, we believe the close is a unifying force for transformation. It is a central point to where your teams can get strategic. When we talked about the technology levers, and the most important being integration across your tech stack, when you look at FloQast, you'll see we integrate to a whole slew of ERPs. We integrate to your cloud storage, so your files are there's a central repository for your files. We integrate with email to push out communications. Accounts love email, but they also love Slack and Teams to perform their communication, whether in the office or not. So we integrate with both those tools to capture the collaboration, but also allow your teams to continue working in tools that they use on a day-to-day. And lastly, we here at FloQast believe Excel is too good to be true. You're not going to get out of it. You'll see once we get into reconciliations where that really plays a role. And so we don't force you onto our own sets of web pages or our own reconciliations. We believe the lowest lift is creating a prescriptive workflow, but continue doing everything else as similar as you're already doing it. And where it makes sense, automate reconciliations. But for the most part, getting there in a step-by-step process rather than trying to do a huge overhaul of all your processes. So you'll see how FloQast really integrates with tech stack that you're using today. And it is a central point to execute your close as well. To operationalize means to measure the abstract and track it to act with intention and improve. And so when we're talking about process improvements, it's measuring certain abstract metrics and tracking them in order to make tweaks and identify the following results post making adjustments to act with intention, and the ultimate goal being to improve. You've seen on previous slides where our teams were able to increase their speed, but also their accuracy by taking a step-by-step approach, documenting their workflows, providing their teams clear instruction and clear responsibilities, so that you remove the ambiguity and everyone can focus on executing the workflows, reducing the time of confusion, and get into the strategic. So we'll get into what that looks like. When we're looking at the 5 key criteria for operational excellence, what we're talking about is seeing with a new set of eyes, gaining complete transparency. So monitoring progress, identifying bottlenecks, validating completion as well. So it's not just where are we, it's also what's gotten done, what's ready for me to review. Always know the when and why, always know where you are exposed. So visibility doesn't just mean you get a monitoring progress view. It's how are we allocating tasks across the team? Is there a workload allocation problem? Where are the bottlenecks? What are recurring late items? So visibility is visibility into the complete operations of your accounting and finance department, not just what's the status update, right? So centralizing documentation to act with confidence. And so eliminating version control issues, the number of times I hear that is actually kind of scary. To reduce your audit risk. So you organize your documentation in one place, you eliminate fragmented data silos, right? I've heard a story of where team would perform their close, the controller would take all the documents and upload into their own personal cloud storage, make any last minute adjustments, just so they were all in one place for the controller. Issue being any adjustments that were made caused version control issues with documents that the rest of the team had prepared during the close. And so what you're trying to do is automatically preserve the story behind the numbers in one place. The team works in one location, and you have a cloud storage environment that mirrors how you're performing your workflows today. So when we talk about built by accounts for accounts, purpose built, we organized the products so that it mirrors a lot of what you're doing today, because we understand how accounts are executing the workflows. This is a big one, automating the mundane, elevating your performance. Where are the ticking and tying workflows that are occurring? Taking 2 data sets and just check marking back and forth. That's got to get automated. And so automating certain tasks, but automation also includes integration, right? Integrating to tools that your teams are using today. The goal isn't to completely wipe everything out that you're doing and start anew. It's taking existing processes, taking existing ways that your team is getting things done, which is working to a point, but uplifting it. Let the software do the grunt work for you. Instead of completely overhauling all your processes, doing most of what you're doing the same today, but uplifting it by allowing technology to automate certain aspects of your workflows. Work better together. this criteria being it's a collaboration point. So build a happier team, speedy collaboration that's also captured as well for control execution purposes. So later on, that provides your team confidence of executing controls, reviewing approvals, capturing review comments, responding to review comments. With a hyper dispersed team, the close involves all aspects of the organization. You're talking a revenue team, an equity team, a warehouse team, inventory. You might have a legal team for any outstanding litigation. So it's a hyper dispersed team. Keep everybody on the same page. And doing so relieves burnout and eliminates mind-numbing status meetings, right? You as a manager, you have the ability to pop in and you have the visibility as pointed in number one. But as a, say, staff or executor on the team, you have clear direction on what needs to get done, by when, and in clear indication of the work that you have completed. And lastly, run at a faster pace, meet tighter deadlines. So this is where we talk about speed and accuracy. Gain the speed of executing workflows quicker, but not sacrificing accuracy at the same time. The goal is not to just do things faster. The goal is to maintain the accuracy, if not increase the accuracy, gain more confidence, while also driving agility. Run in a continuous cycle. Automation eliminates lag time, right? There's a lot of waiting, chasing and waiting that occurs during the close as account areas get finalized. So the visibility drives the recalibration and creates more predictable output for your teams. So keep those things in mind as we go through some of the slides following the in the remaining of the presentation. So when we talk about FloQast, again, the most significant problem that we looked to solve was the close. And so what you see here are some dashboards. Dashboards became a huge thing during the pandemic. When I was at in public accounting, a huge thing during the pandemic was dashboards. How do we get insight without having to walk over to someone's desk, without having to ask for a long-winded 100-line status email? How do we streamline that? And so what you see here are some dashboards. This is offering complete transparency, see with a new set of eyes, increasing your visibility. In addition, having a view with dashboards that show % complete, your progress by workflow, allows you to manage by exception to identify the bottlenecks, but also it provides a scalable solution. Your company performs certain acquisitions. You can bring those in and have a dashboard view of where those new entities are in their close as well. So it's a scalable visibility tool as well. When you're looking at reducing the time in emails and meetings, here's our more detailed view of our close workflow dashboard. And so when you look here, you're seeing there, you can view progress at a global view across all entities. You can track down the close by entity, by specific entities to see where your North American team is or where your European team is, if you have multiple. Or you can do it by business line. If you don't have geographic dispersion in your organization, maybe it's by revenue stream or by business unit. Point being, it's scalable. The tool is scalable so that you can bring in multiple entities and get drilled down visibility by entity. And so automatically can get email updates and even Slack and Teams updates as well. So going back to team tools that your teams are using today, we integrate with those tools to provide your team an update status. You don't always have to go into the tool, but you can get an email or what are tasks that are due today, what are tasks that are late, what are tasks that are ready for review. Those type of integration points, we believe really help teams drive more agility. when you look at being audit ready, most companies that reach a certain level, there is an audit waiting for them, whether it's a banking covenant, a round of financing that's occurred, and so there's an audit requirement there. Could be a statutory audit, could be a pre-IPO readiness, getting ready to go public, being, which is the highest marker of financial statement audits that can occur at the integrated level. So you're testing controls and you're doing the financial statement audit. Nonetheless, audits are going to be waiting for us accounting teams. And so use close management to have the flexibility to set up an organization and tasks that reflect the way your team works. We're not trying to change the way you work. We're trying to change completely. We're trying to uplift the way you work. So you can see on the left, you have a folder structure that most likely mirrors the way your team is looking at things today. This is completely customizable as well. So if you do it by account area, organize your structure by account area. That's what we typically see. Different trial balance account areas in each folder for each financial statement line item or account area. And then it's organized by period. There's a quarterly structure view for quarterly workflows that you have. So think if you do a quarterly close, maybe that's a hard close that you perform versus interim month, you may perform what's called a soft close. You don't book all your accruals. But nonetheless, a customized folder structure. You have on the left, on the right side, checklist items. And so if you think of workflows in accounting, they're very repetitive, but they're also very prescriptive checklist tasks. Prepare, post, and distribute all remaining invoice. Upon completion, verify invoices are properly posted. Kimberly's able to sign off, indicating that that task is completed. If you look at the third one down, review AR aging schedule for unapplied credits. Material credits should be reclassed to AP. Two things I've noted here. One, be as prescriptive as you'd like. As a controller, have complete influence over how the work is getting done and provide that instruction within the checklist description. So here I'm reviewing the AR aging schedule, identifying material credits that should be reclassed, and looking for unapplied credits. You're providing your team a very focused view on what they're performing versus, hey, can you review the AR aging and make sure it looks reasonable? Reasonable was always my favorite word. What does that mean? So there's Kimberly able to sign off. She can upload the schedule onto that checklist item. That's going to get saved in the cloud storage file in the AR folder for March. Single source of truth. And if you look on the right, there's also an area for review comments. So it's capturing that collaboration between preparers and reviewers back to preparers. There's integration points to Slack and Teams and to email. So if she completes, let's say Kimberly completes the AR aging review and is on to another task, well, she can get a Slack notification or a Teams notification if a review comment pops up. And if it makes sense and it's a quick reply, she can reply in Slack and Teams, and it will push back into FloQast, reducing the uplift of where your team has to go in and make changes. If it's a review comment that requires her to come back in, well, it's very seamless to get back into this view, identify the checklist item, and respond to the comment upon further review. So if we're looking here, collaboration will bring the team together, capturing numerous controls. That's probably the first thing that I saw when I was at Jam City, and we were charged with SOX implementation. We utilized FloQast to implement SOX by adding checklist items or being more prescriptive with the checklist items that existed, allocating to different people, notifying that, oh, this person has too much influence over a particular process, and we need to break that up between a review and approval, or a preparer and a reviewer. You can look at scalability. You can create additional workflow, additional folders, and additional checklist items as new processes come in, as new entities are formed. Copy over existing checklist workflows into new entities. So it's highly scalable. Prime example of this was Zoom, which was a customer of ours during the pandemic. And they were able to scale with us from a, say, $15 million company to over $1 billion, adding new checklist items, being prescriptive about how things were getting done during the close. Remove the ambiguity so that your team can get out of the weeds. And lastly, integrated to native resources. You're looking at integration points to ERPs, which we'll get into shortly. Email, Slack, Teams, Excel, cloud storage. You finish a period, lock it down, convert all your files into read-only. And lastly, roll it forward into the next period so that those schedules roll forward. The checklist items roll forward, sign-offs are cleared away, and you have a fresh view of a recurring workflow that occurs on a repetitive period. When we look at reconciliations, a key part of executing the close, this is how we view reconciliations at FloQast. We try to manage and automate reconciliations where it makes sense from a strategy execution standpoint so that your team can be more effective in how they perform recs. So it's standardizing the strategy and process, documenting the overall reconciliation strategy. What tools and what schedules are we using? What source documents are we utilizing? What's the most effective method to perform this reconciliation? Is it using a third-party manual review of a spreadsheet? We have an auto rec feature where you can automate certain reconciliations. That's part of what we talked about, automating the ticking and tying. Our reconciliation management provides that capability. You then get into recs that don't tie out. We have an area for reconciling items for known differences, to track timing and unknown errors, to ensure rec items are recorded, tracked, and managed in one place. So for reviewers, this is great. You have a singular place where all reconciling items that are sources of that explain differences are in one place for you to review. Collaborate and manage. You have a dashboard view that shows real-time summary of progress and status and the predicted impact on the timing of the close. So there are analytical tools that can provide you predictive impact on the timing. And lastly, and I would argue most importantly, is the controls and documentation. You capture the evidence to support the audit while you are doing the work. You're not chasing down evidence months later. I used to feel horrible as an auditor coming in and asking a question in April of the following year about something that occurred in February of the previous year, over 14 months ago. I couldn't tell you what I ate 5 days ago. And so as tough of a ask that it was as an auditor, it was a requirement on our point, and the onus fell on the audit team, on the accounting team, to produce the evidence. Well, focus on doing the work and have that data captured at the source in a singular place, protected with read-only access once a file is closed. In addition, you can implement thresholds that will prevent sign-offs. So there are built-in controls throughout the system as well, where implementing FloQast right away uplifts your control environment with some of the built-in controls we have as well. We understand that it makes sense not to automate all reconciliations. So we have a key integration point with spreadsheets. So you can see bringing in ERP balances from your GL and comparing those to reconcile balances from your spreadsheets, or if you're using one of our auto rec tools, brings in a balance from theirs as well. You have a column for reconciling items for known differences to get you to a difference threshold that is below what is acceptable so your team can sign off. Clear validation that your supporting schedules tied to your ERP. So when you provide PBC items to your auditors, I guarantee if you don't know this already, the first thing they're all doing is cross-footing, footing, and tying to the trial balance. And it was always the worst ask was, hey, the schedule doesn't tie. Eliminate those tactical conversations with your auditors and increase your relationship with your auditors even to a more strategic relationship as well. You have reconciled tracking to give accounts a centralized view of status with balanced comparisons, prepares reviewers, and sign-off dates and controls. Again, tracking items that don't reconcile, you have a column for reconciling items as well. Capture comments, and then again, all of the status from this reconciliation management window feeds into the dashboard. So you have clear visibility on the status of your reconciliation workflows. When we look at AutoRec, which is our automation tool for certain reconciliations that make sense to automate, on average, so AutoRec is essentially a tool that can take two data sets and perform the matching on your behalf. And what we've noted is that tool, AutoRec, automates the matching of over 70% of uploaded transactions on average and can be used to support a range of reconciliation types. This frees up time for you to investigate and resolve exceptions rather than spending the manual time of taking in time. So if you think of bank reconciliations, you're comparing a data set between your ERP and what checks have been cut or checks have been received versus what's cleared in your bank. So AutoRec is a great use case for bank reconciliations because you can then focus on what are the outstanding checks and the deposits in transit pretty quickly. If you look at intercompany, another excellent reconciliation that can be automated using AutoRec. You transfer balances to other companies, automate the reconciliation of that intercompany activity to quickly identify the exceptions rather than doing the manual taking in time. If you look at equity grants, comparing what's been granted from your broker portal, we'll say Fidelity, Schwab, or Carta is another tool, to the approved grants from the board minutes to ensure completeness and accuracy. A whole slew of use cases where if you are comparing any two data sets, that can be automated so that your team can focus on the exceptions. When we talked about measuring the abstract and track it so your team can act with intention to improve, we have an analytics tab in our closed workflow that provides analytical data to your team. Impact the financial close efficiency with FloQast Analyze. How often the controllers are asking, when will the books be closed? You can now forecast when that will happen with our KPIs. You have a status of if you're running late, if you're on time, what's your target close, what's the projected close based on how your team is tracking. Gain valuable insight on the workload. You can gain a recurring late checklist items. You can identify bottlenecks that way, maybe readjusting your timeline. If there's an estimate that builds into a journal entry that is finalizing an account and you need to readjust when that estimate comes through so that your team can update expectations, or if you can find ways to speed up that estimate and adjust due dates and timing accordingly. Nonetheless, you can make process iterations and have a clear visibility on the results with a timeline view of how your close has progressed over a longer period of time. You can look at also specific breakdown by checklist items and reconciliations and where those deadlines fall as well. Again, I can't emphasize enough, identify the perpetual bottlenecks. The close is a highly collaborative process. And so there will be bottlenecks that exist, and empowering your team to identify those bottlenecks. It'll be on your team to do something about them, but utilize FloQast in order to at least identify where those areas exist and be able to provide accurate response on when things will get done. Now, when we talked about the close being a central point for strategic movement of the accounting team, and we talked about the close being a central point for upstream and downstream workflows, what we noticed is teams were starting to expand the use case of the close for those upstream and downstream workflows. And so we created FloQast Ops, which is a checklist for any upstream or downstream workflow. So you can see with the new set of eyes, you can capture the controls that exist in those workflows. You're not relying on an Excel checklist. Excel is great, but it also has its limitations. It's easily manipulative, and there are little to no built-in controls outside of converting it into a read-only file. And so bringing a system that can timestamp your sign-offs, that can capture review comments, that can create a centralized repository for any schedules that you are uploading as well, that integrates with native resources like email, Teams, Slack, provides your team the visibility, feeding into the dashboard view, having workload allocation across your teams, who has too much on their plate, and where can that work get redistributed. So when we're talking about upstream workflows, we're talking about like payroll. When you have a 401k audit, there are certain user entity controls that must be executed in conjunction with handing them, say, an ADP file that is the 401k package. There are certain user entity controls that your team is responsible for performing. Capture those in an upstream workflow with ops by creating a checklist template for your payroll team to execute. If you're looking at a downstream, audit preparedness, or even reporting, when I was at Jam City, it was a huge pain point to gather all the different reports from different groups. Create a checklist item that's prescriptive on which schedules are required from which team and by when. And then you can perform the outreach. You can automate the outreach as well. So really it was looking at expanding out the close capabilities as far as it goes for checklists into other areas within the office of the CFO, specifically starting with the accounting team, to bring them into the middle office and have a central point for all the requests that might go out for any other workflow that's either upstream or downstream. We offer best practice checklists as well. These are ready to go templatized workflow checklists that empower accounting teams to improve the visibility and efficiency in critical areas that are up and downstream from the close. So again, when we're talking about upstream workflows that can be captured in FloQast Ops, we're talking about finalizing AP, calculating and capturing the prepare and review of commissions that might be paid out. And as indicated earlier, payroll processing, highly repetitive, highly recurring, and work that can be prescriptive for teams. When you look at downstream reporting, whether it's financial or SEC reporting, huge use case that we've seen teams use for FloQast Ops, gathering a central point for all the schedules that come in from the various teams. The PBC process, having a central repository for your team can perform their final review before uploading into a auditor portal. Or even better yet, we've seen customers that have actually brought the audit function into FloQast by creating a PBC workflow that more or less mimics what you see in an auditor portal, right? It's a request, a place to put that request and sign off. Audit team can provide their own set of review comments if something doesn't work. So you instead of having to do the uplift of uploading all the documents into a third-party portal, can bring your auditors now into FloQast and perform the audit through the system. Lastly, if you look at taxes, a whole slew of requests that are again recurring and cyclical and are the same set of requests that are made each period. You can templatize that process with ops. And so when we look at the road to operational excellence, our goal is to walk down that path with you without disrupting your business substantially. We look at gaining your team faster answers, better teamwork, greater confidence in your numbers. And the results speak for themselves. Teams have been able to execute close and increase the speed of their close by 3 to 5 days. They have quick, cleaner audits. So there's a speed and without sacrificing accuracy. We've actually increased speed and increased accuracy with a 26% reduction in audit time. And there goes the productivity, 25% time savings across teams. So there's it was purpose built to lower the barrier to entry in the implementation period because accounting never stops. And so trying to not disrupt your business, keeping things more or less the same, but it's a formalization of your processes, and it's speeding up the areas that can be automated, really uplifting your control environment, your accounting operational workflows. And so in a summer of automation, the close is what we view as a central point to make the shift from tactical to strategic by really formalizing that process, getting confident with that process to be able to deliver to downstream workflows as well. And so as a closing poll question, asking the audience if they are interested in FloQast or not, is there a way for us to put up this poll question?
Yeah, I can put it up real quick.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, if you can bring that up. There you go. You should see the poll. If you're interested in learning more about FloQast, it's a single choice, yes or no. Again, it's been my pleasure to have a chance to speak with you all today. Again, my name is Jaysen Dyal, and product marketing manager here at FloQast. Feel free, if you'd like more information, get a formalized demo and see the product in action. But also, I hope teams were able to gather some thought leadership on how starting with the close is a great starting point for your team to get into the strategic role from the back office to the middle office, deliver numbers faster and with more accuracy, be able to have the story behind why numbers change. There are a lot of capabilities that I didn't show you today. These are some of the base capabilities that our application provides, but there are additional things like performing a variance analysis, which might be a combination of flux or actual to actual analysis and a budget to actual analysis. There are ways to automate some of the requests out to third parties with our tool called Remind. So if interested in learning more about the other capabilities that our application has, please feel free to reach out. And again, it's been my pleasure to speak with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jaysen. And again, thanks for everybody for attending today's webinar. Our next webinar in the summer series is with Lease Query, and this one is a CPE credit webinar and entitled Not One and Done, Lease Accounting After Transition. And that's on Wednesday, June 28th, and we hope to see you then. Thank you.